I'm going to talk about Joseph Goebbels. He is most well known for being the Nazi Minister of Propaganda, and he helped manipulate the entire country to support Nazism and Hitler. So let's get into it, shall we? His full name was Paul Joseph Goebbels. He was born in Reit, which is in the northern Rhine of Germany, and he died in Berlin. He was born in 1897 and died in 1945, the day after Hitler. So he was the Nazi Minister of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, and he was this very talented orator and propagandist who could really move people with his words. He was really emotional about it, and he was presented as a favorable image of the Nazi regime. Like, you could be this guy, you could be Goebbels, you could be like right up there speaking to people. He was Minister of Propaganda, and he did serve as Chancellor for one day. He did one thing, which wasn't that successful. By that, I mean he wasn't that successful. And then he took his own life, along with his wife and his 6 children. Well, prior to that, he had contemplated committing suicide 2 times. So, I mean, think about it. If only he had been successful. I'm not saying like he actually tried and was unsuccessful. He just didn't. But one of those times was when his girlfriend left him. He was really, really sad about it, and he contemplated suicide and was really close to actually doing it. But his friends stopped him. And then the second time was in 1932, between July and November. The Nazis, in July, they had 230 seats in the Reichstag. In November, they had 196, so they lost a bit. And in November, when they lost, Goebbels was so distraught. He thought they had lost the opportunity to gain power, and he actually contemplated suicide. Think about it. If he had actually done it, what would the Nazi regime look like without the guy who spread the beliefs? That would have been very different. So, his childhood and youth. He was a male child. He was the 3rd out of 5 children, so that comes along with its own issues. His parents were Friedrich Goebbels and Katharina Maria Odenhausen, and they were strictly Catholic. And he was very well educated. He had a high school education. He went to the Heidelberg University. He studied there until 1922. He got a doctorate. He studied history, philosophy, philology. So he was very well educated. And his parents were very supportive. They supported him economically throughout the 5 years he was in education. So you can't say he was not loved. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of people in his family, but his parents did help him. So I don't get that part. I get the part where he had a club foot, which was one of his feet. He was 2 inches shorter than the other, so he walked around with a limp all day, like that. And this was because he contracted polio as a child. I don't remember the age, maybe around 14. So he had that limp throughout the rest of his life. He wore maybe a leg brace or a walking cane. And because of this, he was not allowed to fight in the First World War. And he was bullied because of it. So that damaged his ego, and he thought, I need to be something more. So that bullying, because he had the 1 foot shorter than the other, made him try to search for something that would make him be more, and he found the Nazis. This leg thing also was the cause of more criticism, more when he was in power. Foreign cartoonists drew him as the devil, because the devil had a limp and the cloven hoof, so they just drew him as the devil. And if you look at pictures of Goebbels, he reminds me of a rat. He's very skinny. He's not that tall. I don't know, he just resembles a rat or a skull or something. I don't know. He doesn't resemble a human person. So he just, I don't know. I don't like his whole face and it's just, how could you trust that guy? Just saw that guy who was very skinny and wore his Nazi uniform. I don't know. No. He did try to pursue a career writing novels, expressionist ones, in the literary, in the dramatic, in the journalistic efforts. But he didn't really succeed. He did publish a book when he was 26 called Michael, which was a semi-autobiographic book in which he told the story of a young boy named Michael and how he managed things. But they were all based on his life, but it was an idealized version of himself. So not that true. He did experience nationalist characteristics. He was nationalist. It's not like he didn't care. From the beginning he was nationalist, but I mean he wasn't that passionate about it. His friend in university did introduce him into more socialist and communist ideas. He wasn't a communist, no way. He was left-leaning. So out of all the Nazis, he was the most left-wing. And he was actually, he actually came into the party because he liked the left-wing ideals. And soon after he came into the party, around 1926, he was called a communist agitator. Goebbels, a communist agitator. He was anti-bourgeois in his youth. He's like, oh no, I don't like the higher classes, even though he later associated himself with the higher classes. So the hypocrisy in the Nazi regime. I mean, think about it. If he was a normal person, if he wasn't Joseph Goebbels, the minister of propaganda, he would have been prosecuted by the Nazis. He had a disability. He would have been killed. But because he was such an amazing orator, they spared him. Without him, the Nazi regime wouldn't have reached what it did. So, yeah. He wasn't anti-Semitic at first. He would go on to be, but not at first. He had high school teachers who were Jewish, and he did value them a lot. His university professor, Jewish. He was engaged to a half-Jewish girl. And, fun fact, Magda, his wife, it was found out that she had, her father, her biological father, could have been Jewish, but they were already married and Magda cut off all ties. She rejected that side and they still stayed married, which, I mean, Magda wasn't a good person as well. It's not like she was a good person just married to that. No, she was not good. She was actually called the First Lady of the Third Reich because Hitler could have not been seen with a girl. He couldn't be seen with his girlfriend because he had to be available for the ladies to attract more female supporters. Goebbels did contemplate political involvement early on. But he wasn't really that invested in becoming a politician until later on, when he accidentally joined a party. He found out through friends, and he joined. Again because of the left-wing ideals they had. They had a 25-point program in 1920 by Drexler, which, if you read it, it's 50% is left-wing, 50% is right-wing. So anyway, he joined the party in autumn of 1924, and at first he was just a supporter, but then he began speaking. He was really gifted. So both Hitler and Goebbels were really gifted public speakers. Hitler was more dramatic. He was more like moving around, just shouting. Goebbels could write very well. He could express his words brilliantly and just transmit a message. Just bent. I don't know how he did it. If you watch the Sportplatz speech, which I'm going to get into that later, I don't understand anything because I don't speak German, but you could see the way he spoke and the way he transmitted the message. It was captivating, as well as Hitler's. But there were two different styles who were equally effective. But again, they were just bad people. He, because of his gifted speaking skills, he became a district administrator of the Nazi Party. And he also edited a National Socialist magazine and organized beer hall brawls and other events. So the Nazi Party was banned from 1924 to 1928, and Hitler was banned from public speaking from 1924 to 1927, if I'm not mistaken. Between that time, because Nazi Party couldn't access the party and they couldn't have Hitler speaking, they used Goebbels. So they still had someone who could really move the masses towards them. They still had someone who would gain support. And Hitler did give a few speeches, even though he wasn't supposed to, but the main speaker was Goebbels, and he became a sort of attraction, if he was coming to your town or to your city to speak, you had to go see him. Like, oh my god, such an amazing speaker is coming to town, you have to go see him. And that is how they got supporters. He was a propaganda master even before he was the minister for propaganda. And then in November 1926, he was appointed to be the Nazi Party leader in Berlin. So the Gauleiter. The Gauleiter is the party leader in an area, not a local government official. So by 1926, the Nazis were officially banned. They couldn't act as a party, they couldn't participate in elections, but yeah, they had leaders in areas, and the Nazi Party was founded in Munich, in Bavaria, but they needed a stronghold in Berlin, the capital of Germany. If they wanted to gain power somewhere, they had to be in the capital. You can't just not be in the capital. And so his appointment to the Nazi Party high positions was because he associated himself with Hitler rather than with Strasser. So when Hitler got out of jail and when he became head of the Nazi Party again, before that there was factionalism. There was Strasser handling the left wing and Hitler handling the right wing. And there was like a fight, and Goebbels fought a lot with Strasser, especially in the newspaper. I'm going to get into that later. But they fought a lot of time, and they disagreed, and he ended up going towards Hitler. And because Hitler gathered more support, especially with Goebbels, they pushed Strasser aside. And if I'm not mistaken, he was killed in the Night of the Long Knives in 1934, Strasser. So yeah, he did make the right choice and supported Hitler, which let him gain power. And Goebbels, he wasn't a socialist per se, but he did support left-wing ideals. And because he was a sycophant and he just wanted political gain, he sided with Hitler. But he did adore Hitler, even though he didn't really believe all the things he said. He wrote in his diary because, he was keeping a diary like a 13-year-old girl. I mean, I get it, but it's useful for historians, But, in his diary he wrote, "Hitler, I love you." Literally, he wrote, "I love you." It was just this adoration towards Hitler. Just blind support. That was the case for all the Nazis, but especially Goebbels. Goebbels just wasn't not in love, but he felt this love towards Hitler that couldn't be explained. So, how he became a propaganda genius and how he gained more power. Well, he was appointed to the Reichstag in 1928 when the Nazis won 12 seats. Two of them were Goering and Goebbels. And he gathered strength in Berlin for the Nazi Party, and up until January 1933, when Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. He founded Der Angriff, which is the attack, in 1927, and edited Das Reich from 1940 to 1945. So he was an editor in many newspapers, as well as controlling all the other newspapers. So he controlled his own, the Nazi ones, and controlled other newspapers supporting the Nazis. So he propagated the Führer, or the Hitler myth, in which they portrayed Hitler as the Messiah, as someone who had come to Germany to save them from the corrupt Weimar politicians who had destroyed Germany in November 1918. The November criminals, the stab in the back myth, that whole idea. No, I mean, just propagated this myth. There's propaganda posters, which is, I've seen one, Hitler with light shining onto him from the sky, from God. I mean, if you think someone is a god, that's not a good sign. It's just not good. He created all the rituals, the party demonstrations, the huge rallies. When Hitler became Chancellor, through the Brandenburg Gate, a lot of thousands, if not millions, of SA members just walked through it, and that was organized by Goebbels, along with all the many different rallies that took place. The guy, you can't deny the genius. I mean, it was for the wars because he caused a lot of destruction, but through all the rallies, through all the pamphlets, all the propaganda, he did get a lot of support for the Nazi Party. Which, I mean, again, for the worst, but you can't deny the genius. He was a really talented man in that sense. He had a schedule of public speaking. Like every so and so he would give a speech, if not him, Hitler. Only a handful of Nazi leaders gave a speech because they didn't want to lose support. So they needed good people who knew how to speak publicly. So Goebbels himself did it, Hitler, others. He organized public speaking. He basically engineered the Nazi propaganda machinery. Propaganda. In 1933, there were 50 broadcasts of Hitler speaking. And then he also had the People's Receiver, the radio. 1 in 7 people had that radio. It was really cheap, mass-produced. 70% of households had it. Just all for propaganda. He dominated the movies. He was, again, the National Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda that was created by Hitler for him, that didn't exist before. So you just knew how good the man was at his job when a whole ministry was created for him to spread the message. He was the president of the Chamber of Culture. By culture, it obviously means Aryan culture, Aryan ideas. Propagating the stab in the back myth, and basically denying the spread of culture that was not deemed Aryan. So, Jewish culture, African American, black culture, just culture in general. Like, if you were not Aryan, your culture didn't get through because of Goebbels. He controlled the press, the radio, the theater, any movies came out, literature, music, and the fine arts. And on the 10th of May of 1933, he organized the massive burning of books, which were deemed un-German. So, by authors who were not German, authors who were Jewish, authors who didn't support the Nazis, including the works of Albert Einstein, a Jewish German at the time, who managed to flee. Which, thank God, What if Einstein had stayed in Germany under the Nazi regime? Who knows what the world would be right now without his discoveries? He organized Previously, he organized the boycott of Jewish businesses on the 1st of April, which was kind of a failure because it didn't really work. And it was too radical, and Hitler's like, no. Hitler did support it, but only to appease radicals like Heydrich. And yeah, but that wasn't that successful, and it showed Nazi radicalism really early on. So they just didn't do it again until much later on. He couldn't control foreign propaganda against the Nazis, and he wasn't really that interested in music and art. As long as it didn't have any anti-Nazi messages, he didn't really care. Cultural policies were somewhat liberal, and by that I mean it's not like you could post anything. You couldn't, especially during the later years. But as long as your art, your cultural thing was not anti-German or anti-Aryan, you'd be fine. If you supported Aryan ideas, even better. But if you had a movie about anything that wasn't anti-German, you could post it. So you can celebrate Jewish culture, but you could talk about, I don't know, literally anything that wasn't Jewish, that wasn't harmful to the Aryan idea and the Hitler myth. If you really wanted to be successful in this Nazi era, you needed to be propagating Nazi ideals. But again, like I've said, he didn't need to post media, and he had to capitulate on the demands of national extremists. So he couldn't be that moderate because otherwise he would lose the extremists. He couldn't be too extremist, so he would lose the moderates. So that was a tough balance, but he managed to strike that balance. He managed to really balance the support. The propaganda messages, he was smart about it. I mean, for example, the Nazis owned 27 newspapers who had 2.5 million daily circulations, but he couldn't spread the newspapers and the propaganda messages too thin, because if they had it all throughout Germany, all the same message every single day, every single week, every single year, people would get tired and just not read it and maybe eventually see through the lies. So he was smart about it. He said quality over quantity. Efficiency was better than just telling outright lies. So you could tell a lie, but it had to be well done. So you couldn't just lies, because someone would find out. So if you put little lies and just place it slowly into German culture, they would be successful and they would spread around the country, which they did. So movies who propagated the Nazi ideals were Triumph of the Will, which was a very successful one about the 1934 Nuremberg rally, which was filmed by a woman actually. So that was progressive. Goebbels allowed it. Olympia in 1936, celebrating the Olympics and the Aryan ideals. Which in reality, the Olympics were kind of chaotic for the Nazis because they, in theory, won, but then Jesse Owens, an African American runner, he won like three medals, like 3 gold medals or 4, which really shook the Aryan ideals. Why could this guy, who is not Aryan, be the Aryan athlete? And the Eternal Jew, in 1940, in German it's called Der Jude. And it really corrupted the idea. It told a story about this Jewish servant in the 18th century, and in reality that was based on a true story. And really, the Jewish guy wasn't that bad, but Goebbels managed to like fit in. The criticism towards the Jews painted them in a really bad light, and But like 90% of all movies had outright political messages. Not like Der Jude, who were more subliminal, and you really didn't notice it, and you just like unconsciously thought, oh wow, Jews are bad. So if you saw enough of these movies, you would start changing your mind about Jews. He helped propagate the Night of the Broken Glass. I find it really funny because the Night of the Broken Glass was from the 9th of November to the 10th of November, and this was exactly 15 years after the Munich Push. So Goebbels, he was like, I'm going to celebrate 15 years of the amazing push Hitler did, which was, he didn't say it was a failure, because, I mean, the Nazis were in power, but it was this brave act by our leader, Adolf Hitler, and we have to celebrate it. And how do you celebrate it? By damaging Jewish property, causing 1 billion damages, and making the Jews pay for it, destroying like 7,000 synagogues, deporting 30,000 Jews, killing like 90. I mean, he did get into favor, even more favor with Hitler after this, but it was 1938. No, just don't do that. I mean, I know you want, like, everyone wants to get into favor with their boss, but don't. Like, this was all because this one Jew killed this Nazi foreign diplomat in Paris. But don't do that. And he was part of the final solution. He helped cover it up with propaganda. Actually, really funny. In the Sportpalast speech, he almost let the word extermination of the Jews. He almost let that out. He corrected himself mid-word, and if you look at the transcript, you can notice a change. People didn't notice it at the time, but he almost said, "Oh, we're exterminating the Jews. The Jews deserve to be exterminated." And he is reported with saying that, well, he never visited an extermination or a concentration camp, but he is reported to have said that the Jews, it was brutal what they were doing to them, but they deserved it. He would never go see it because that was too much, but the Jews deserved it. So his influence decreased in 1937, 1938. It's not saying that he lost influence, but rather than that he was not that important. Nazis already had an authoritarian regime. They needed him for war propaganda, but as far as getting support, that wasn't really that necessary. Also, he had kind of got a bit out of favor with Hitler, because in 1938, I think it was, he had a love affair with the Czech actress Lida Barova, who he fell in love with, and he tried to leave his wife Magda for her, and Magda went to Hitler, begged him and said, "Hey Hitler, I need help. My husband is trying to divorce me because of this woman." And Hitler told Goebbels, "Okay, tell you what, in 3 months, if you stay with your wife, and if in 3 months you're still in love with this woman, you can leave Magda." And Goebbels was like, fine. Because, the admiration with Hitler was more than his feelings towards Lida. And there's a series of photos of this, this time, where it's just Goebbels and his wife and his couple of his kids. And that was forced. That was a really staged photograph, because Goebbels wanted to be with Lida, he couldn't. And he did see this 3 months, and by the end of the 3 months, he did stay with Magda. But Hitler had Lida Barova deported to Czechoslovakia. He banned his work in Germany. This happened with another actress, but this actor, not exactly this. He was a womanizer, a very unlikely one, but again, power. what can you do? He founded, was it the UEF or UFA, UAF? Oh, he had a film studio, and there was this actress who Goebbels also liked, but this one refused to sleep with him. And the next day, she showed up to work, and the movie had been cancelled, and she had been blacklisted from every single movie studio in Germany. So you couldn't really refuse Goebbels, but if you accepted Goebbels and Goebbels liked you, you also lost. So it was a lose-lose situation. But yeah. And his role as propaganda minister, it didn't really change after the war. During the war, he just propaganda, oh, we're winning, we're amazing, look at our army. Well, it was exactly what the Weimar politicians were doing in the First World War, who they criticized because, oh, they were telling us lies, they were stabbing us in the back. That was exactly what the Nazis did in 1945, up till 1945. So, the hypocrisy. They were just a bunch of hypocrites. His mastery of propaganda was really apparent after the defeat in Africa and after the defeat in Stalingrad, which ended on the 2nd of February of 1943, actually. So a few years ago to this day. I mean, quite a few years ago. But he used these defeats not by lying, not by saying, oh, we're winning Stalingrad. No, so and so lost this battle, lost this, but they ended up winning because they were strong, and we're Aryans, we're even stronger than them, we're gonna win. So he did not technically lie there, but he did bend the facts and use history to back him up, even though it was kind of falsified history, which was what they did in school. They taught false history to support the Aryans. His public appearances became an image of the positive things in the Nazi Party, because there was this guy standing in front of thousands of people saying how great the German war effort was going, while other Nazi officials were hiding because they were embarrassed. So you didn't see Goering giving speeches, you didn't see Himmler giving speeches. Hitler did, but Goebbels and Hitler were really the ones who kept on speaking during the war, even after they were losing. So, yeah. And he did manage to increase efforts in the war front, in the home front of the war. And the way they did this was, he was the protagonist of Total War, with the famous Sport Palace Total War speech. This was after the defeat in Stalingrad, and it was in February of 1943, and he called for total war. This was the speech I was telling you about, in which he almost said about the execution of the Jews. The guy got carried away and almost said it. He did criticize Jews in that speech. He did say, oh, we need total war, we need to concentrate all our effort into this one great war. And if you see the video, people just are clapping so much. I mean, I said it before, but he was just this really amazing orator who could really move people. Not moving as in emotionally, but support, and he could really use his words. And then in July 20th, 1944, there was an attempt on Hitler's life. I think it was Operation Valkyrie. And Hitler survived, obviously. But Goebbels managed to turn this to his advantage. He said, oh yes, people try to kill our Führer, but he didn't die, because he is our savior, and this means we're going to get to win the war in the end, because why would destiny had let him live if not because of this? And then in August 25th of that year, he became the Reich plenipotentiary of total war. This was, as Goebbels himself said, too late, because by August, the war was pretty much lost, and in less than a year, Germany would surrender, Japan would surrender, Goebbels and Hitler would both be dead. Himmler would also be dead. It was... Sorry about that. Just too late. I mean, if they had let him do the total war, because they did, after the Sport Class speech, but it wasn't really that effective. Sorry. So it wasn't. Sorry. It wasn't that effective because they had to concentrate on other areas of the economy, not only in war. So yeah, they did move towards a bit of total war after the speech, but then in August of 1944, they moved further towards total war, but it was too late again. So his brief appointment as the Chancellor of Germany, he wasn't the President or the Führer, but the Chancellor, because Hitler, in his will, stated that the office of Führer would be divided again to President and Chancellor. And he did. This other guy was appointed Chancellor. Goebbels was appointed, Zodka was appointed President. Goebbels was appointed Chancellor. Hitler committed suicide on the 30th of April, 1945. And Goebbels became Chancellor. He was the only Nazi of the inner circle who stayed in the bunker. Himmler tried to flee. He fled, but he got caught and committed suicide. Goering fled, he got caught and committed suicide in the following year. Hess had been captured many years before. Heydrich had been killed. The only loyal to right until the end was Goebbels. I mean, Eva Braun was there, but she also committed suicide with Hitler. Magda was also there. So on May the 1st, he killed his wife and the doctor. They went to the children's bedroom. They gave the children a sleeping pill, and then they gave them cyanide. All 6 of them, with the youngest being 5. And all 6 were killed, and then they took their own lives. The accounts here vary. Some say they took cyanide. Some say they shot each other. Some say an SS shot them. But who knows? I think my theory is Goebbels shot Magda and then shot himself. But they had an SS standing by just in case. And after they shot themselves, or whatever happened, an SS shot them again just to make sure. Hitler had been cremated. Hitler and Eva Braun had oil put over them and then lit on fire so the remains would disappear. And they did find, I think it was Hitler's jawline, but so it wasn't completely disappeared, but most of it. So Goebbels wanted the same. So when he died and his wife died, him and his wife were incinerated again. But this time they weren't completely incinerated, and they found the remains, and there's pictures of Goebbels' body. I mean, that's how I see Goebbels, because that's like kind of poetic in that sense. He was second best to Hitler. He wanted to be Hitler, but not really. So he was always following him, not there with him. And the bodies were found by Soviet troops when they invaded Berlin that same day, or even the following day. So yeah, Goebbels, a propaganda minister who was way too successful. And if you think about it, if he had committed suicide back when he tried to, who knows what would have happened. I think another propaganda minister would have come up, but nowhere near as successful as Goebbels. He was a really clever man, too clever, who just was evil. And that's one of the reasons I find him really interesting, because just the mass manipulation of the media. And that's still present today. Think about it, if you look at Twitter, there's this, I'm not saying Twitter is all controlled by like Goebbels, but mass manipulation is there, false news. Some politicians spread a lot of lies, and they manipulate people and move the masses. I'm not going to name names, but I think you know what I'm talking about. And yeah, Goebbels' legacy, and by legacy I mean his ability to control the masses, is still present to this day. Neo-Nazi movements are kind of based on the ideas Goebbels spread. So that's one of the reasons I really enjoy studying Goebbels, because he's just such a fascinating historical figure who, I don't say he came from nothing. He was very well educated, but he was this failed writer who just, his reviews didn't get any attention. His book, Michael, didn't. The only thing that got any attention was his diaries. Some of them were burnt. Not all of them. Some of them still remain. Oh, I forgot to say. When he was chancellor, the one thing he did, he ordered one of the soldiers to go and tell the German soldiers in Berlin to have a ceasefire. The war was lost. They knew it. The soldier went, and the commander, when he received the information, he's like, "Yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that." Oh well. He did try to do one thing, and he failed. I mean, I wouldn't say all Goebbels did was fail. Like, no way. He was really successful. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Bye.